Welcome to Decoding Devy. This is episode 5. I am Brandon Haye at Haye B3, and we're bringing you this from IDP Guys. And I have another great guest this week, Mr. Chris Moxley, and you can find them at Chris Moxley 19 on Twitter. And as you can see on the screen, Spencer Rattler is his QB1. So, Chris, thanks for joining.
Absolutely, yeah. I've been trying to hop on here for a while, so I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, so Chris works with me at Campus of Canton. We did a lot of the pretty much we were on the tailgate show in the morning. Every Saturday this it's college football season. He does great work. He did rankings by himself for college football fantasy, which we'll talk about later. And he also works with Alfred and Will, who I hope we can get on later. And they do a lot of great betting information for college football. So I know you guys are trying to kind of tweak, maybe some things for next year. Any tidbits for the next college football season from you guys?
I think we're going to see some really exciting content that maybe gets delivered at a higher frequency. So like we might be delivering stuff multiple times a week, especially during Maction, instead of the structure that we have. So I think we're going to ramp up kind of what we're doing. We had a pretty successful year. I think across the board, we're about 60% between Alfred, Will, and I. And listen, if you're above 55%, you're a good, or at least positive better. So hopefully we can keep that going and really build on that. But hopefully just delivering more consistent and better content. That's really always the goal.
Yeah, definitely. And like I said, the college football rankings, a lot of those you saved me a couple of weeks. Just looking at those because there's not really that many rankings week to week like that. So that was great. And like I said, we'll kind of talk. I want to kind of talk through your process on both betting and that later on. But usually every week I try to get someone to come on that's, either, alum or a fan of the team, something that just recently happened. And last week, the Spencer Rattler news came out like right after I finished the pod and everything. So I wanted to bring you on. So just talking about, both these Oklahoma guys, Austin Stodner coming over also to South Carolina. So I know that it's going to be obviously an impact, but how do you think it really changes what South Carolina tries to do next year, since they obviously ran the ball more than they passed, but it was pretty close. So do you think that changes with Rattler, or that's still part of their strategy?
So one, as a fan, I'm really excited. Rattler's the best quarterback we've had in 8-9 years, probably. Dylan Thompson got drafted in 2014. So at least since then. But I think it's an interesting fit. If I was Rattler, I'm not sure I would have chosen it, to be honest. I think his connection with Shane Beamer played obviously a huge role here. But I do think it changes the dynamic of this offense, because this offense saw a graduate assistant who came into the year not intending to play football, in Zeb Noland, start a handful of games. Luke Doty, who was up and down, has been injured throughout his tenure, played wide receiver last year, started a few games. And then Jason Brown, who entered the transfer portal this week and was a St. Francis transfer in. So it's been an up and down year. So I do think that it'll change the way that we can run our offense, because I do think that Rattler is going to totally change the quarterback room. I think we'll pass a lot more. We're losing our most effective back end, Quandre White. It'll probably be the Kevin Harris, Marshawn Lloyd, Juju McDowell show on in the running game, which is still a good trio. But I do think Spencer Rattler totally changes the game. And I think we'll see a lot more passing, because now we have a quarterback that can actually throw the ball. And we've seen throw the ball at a high level in Division I football, which we haven't seen from a South Carolina quarterback in a very long time.
Right, definitely. And, you guys finished 6-6. Was that above your expectations for South Carolina this past year?
Absolutely. I'm really, I think that's a testament to how Shane Beamer's kind of turned around the program a little bit. So I can't say enough about how good Beamer has been, but depending on where you were looking at what book, we were projected 3 to 3.5 wins. And so 6-6 is huge. The wins like you have on the screen, right? Florida, Auburn, like those are huge wins for this program, trying to build to move forward. 6-6 was all I could ask for. I'm just glad to be in a bowl game, to be honest, even if it's a bowl about mayonnaise. I'm just I'm just happy.
Yeah, so I definitely think because, I know a lot of people have said since, players are opting out and, there's playoff that, bowls don't mean as much. But I think for teams like South Carolina, those fringe teams that are trying to build something, these games are huge to get those players more practice, get them another game. And, like you're saying that I remember I was at a sports bar and I wasn't even really paying attention to that Florida South Carolina game. And I looked up and saw that you guys were just spanking them. And I was like, whoa. And I think that does, a testament, even though Florida was, a dumpster fire near the end of the year, still they should have the talent to not get blown out, like that way. And then, another good win against Auburn. And I have some of the stats up there. And as you see, like they got 6 wins with the offense, very not great,
No.
I mean, that's probably saying it very nicely. But
it is.
I do wonder. So I kind of thought Nick Muse would have a little bit more impact this past year. He was kind of like a sleeper, like a late sleeper. I kind of got in C2C, just to fill in at the tight end position. I think he had like 20 some catches this year. Was it just like you're saying, the passing game just was so limited, or did they not really pass the tight end that much, or what was really behind that?
So I was never a big Nick Muse fan because I always felt like he honestly doesn't know how to catch the football. I think he's fairly athletic, and I think that he's good at certain aspects of playing the position, but he's not really a receiving tight end because he just doesn't, like, his hands are really, really bad. I'm just going to be honest about that. And I love Nick Muse. Cool guy. He actually does a lot for the Columbia community. So I really appreciate that about him, but he cannot catch a football. Jaheim Bell was a second leading receiver, and he was our receiving tight end this year, and he jumped Muse as a true sophomore. So I like Bell in that role. I'm not sure if Nick Muse comes back or not. I don't think he's accepted any like bowl invitations, but I wouldn't be surprised if he did because I think he'll get drafted. I think he has like a lot of skills that will translate to the next level, but he's probably more of like a Chris Manhertz role, like where he just is a blocking tight end at the next level, which is fine. Valuable position. Not sure he's a productive fantasy asset.
Gotcha. So do you think that with Stodner coming in, do you think they'll play more 2 tight end type scheme there? Try to target the tight ends? Because I don't know. I know Van did some nice things last year, but I don't know much about the South Carolina wide receivers. How that really looks.
Yeah, I would not be surprised if our most popular set was 2 tight ends, because I think that the best 2 receiving options next year are probably going to be Jaheim Bell and Austin Stogner. Josh Van was really good this year, so maybe that's a strong trio. But Jaheim Bell, who I've been talking about for a while, he's really athletic. He's a little small for a tight end, but if he can add a little bit more weight, he's a guy that I think will rocket up some boards, especially if they're playing more 2 tight end personnel, which I think they should. And I think they will. Our offense coordinator, Marcus Satterfield, came out today and he said, everybody thinks I stink, and then told Spencer Rattler, everybody thinks you stink. Let's prove them wrong. I was like, okay, that's not really like a great endorsement, but I do think he is on a mission to at least change the way that he's calling games. So if the answer is a more pass heavy, but like 2 tight end sets, then I think that's a good call, because I do think that's where the strength of this passing offense really lies.
Definitely. Do you think they're going to play more with Lloyd and Harris in the game at the same time, or do you think they just go to kind of platoon back and forth?
I have no idea, because Juju McDowell was arguably their second best running back this year, behind Zaquan Jerry White. So it is a nasty 3-headed committee that, for like C2C, CFF purposes, is like a huge avoid. Like I don't want to touch any of them, and I still think Lloyd had the most talent coming out. I just have no idea what happened this year in terms of what his role was. So it's extremely hard to project. And Juju McDowell doesn't have size for the next level. So he's just like an explosive collegiate back. It's just incredibly hard running back room to really understand where the roles lie, I think, heading into 2022.
Definitely, yeah. I think many people were surprised that how that running back committee kind of came out, because a lot of people thought Kevin Harris was going to continue that, and then a lot of people thought with Marshawn Lloyd coming back, I guess they. Do you think he gets a bigger workload, and they were just trying to he was just trying to get back in the swing of things after that injury, or?
I have no idea, because he tore it. One of the first practice, or Marshawn Lloyd towards ACL, one of the first practices of 2021, 2022, 2020, maybe. I don't know. The years just they just all line up together at this point.
With COVID, it's hard to figure out what year we're in, what year players are in. Yeah, all the years just
anyway. But his freshman year, he tore his ACL early in the process. So you would think that he would be healthy. He just was not explosive. He just did not look as good as a guy like Zaquandre White. I think he looked as good as Kevin Harris did. Juju McDowell looked more explosive than both, but I mean, he doesn't really have requisite size to feature for more than like 10 touches a game. So it's just an incredibly hard room to read currently.
Yeah, that is interesting. And I didn't think Spencer Rattler would go to South Carolina, but I did say when, all that was happening last year with Oklahoma, I just thought he needed to go somewhere, still a Power 5 school, but that doesn't have like the pressure that Oklahoma has. For example, I kind of said like a Nebraska or something like that. So I guess South Carolina is like, right in that realm. So with Rattler coming in, I'm guessing this is just a 1-year deal for Rattler if he, performs well enough. What do you think they can do next year, kind of SEC wise in that East?
I think a safe expectation is going 6-6 again. I think they have wins against Georgia State, Charlotte, South Carolina State on their schedule, probably Vanderbilt. So that's 4 locked-in wins. I mean, there's going to be close games against Kentucky, probably a close game against Missouri, potentially close game against Tennessee. So I think 6-6 is a realistic expectation. Their other games are Clemson, Georgia, Texas A&M, and like those are tough games to win. So
yeah, I think in the East, I mean, it's obvious Georgia's at the top, and then I guess you would say Kentucky is second right now with how they've done at least the last couple of years, and then pretty much everyone else, it's just other than Vanderbilt's at the bottom. So then like the rest of them are kind of all in jumble, because you could see who knows what Florida's going to do. Tennessee showed some promise, but they're still Tennessee, so we don't know how that will go. So I actually have a friend that went to South Carolina, so I somewhat keep up with what's going on there. So I've no ill will with the Gamecocks, so I like to see them do well. Good underdog story, and when they made the SEC championship before, I mean, I thought that was exciting, and so it'll be interesting how Rattler is used, and if he kind of learned a lesson from everything that happened to Oklahoma and kind of just like has a different mindset, which I'm sure the people at South Carolina kind of had a talk with him, and this will probably never come out, but I do wonder how many teams really reached out to Rattler and were interested. I mean, we'll probably never know that, but it's just an interesting type thing. So
I was going to say, I don't think we'll ever really know, but I think the connection with Beamer probably at least influenced his decision if he did have other Power 5 offers. Like, I think the Nebraska rumor is probably legit, but I do think that connection probably swayed him to the SEC. So that's my guess. I don't know. You're right. We'll probably never know.
Yeah, that's the thing about the transfer portal now. There's so many like ins and outs that no one will ever know, because it seems like a lot of people are fairly tight-lipped, about this, and there's rumors, but it's just random people on Twitter that have like 10 followers that like everyone goes crazy about, but we don't know if it's true. So now the early signing day. Is this the second year they've done early signing day? Which is third?
Maybe third.
But I feel like this year it was, I don't know, I feel like everyone paid attention to it more, because I guess more people maybe are signing for early signing. I'm not totally sure, but we have the list up here. I hadn't looked at the top 25. I was actually surprised. And, there's some teams that you wouldn't necessarily think were up there. You see Missouri right now, early signing day, they're at 12, Tennessee 15. Stanford's up there, and South Carolina's at 21. So they have 4 4-stars. So do you think there's anyone, at least offensively, from those freshmen that'll make an impact immediately in 2022? Or are they more to the future after that?
So Tanner Bailey is probably our biggest get as a class. I thought he was going to go to Oregon. He eventually settled with South Carolina. Some people really, really like him. I don't have a strong opinion. To be honest, I haven't watched much of him because I really didn't expect him to end up here. He was crystal balled, I think, the night before he signed a couple times. So it was a nice win for Shane Beamer and everyone. I don't think he's going to have an impact this year, but I think he's probably the gem of our class. I do think a player that can have an impact, maybe in like a wide receiver 2 role, is Sampson. So he was played alongside Quinn Ewers at South Lake Carroll, and at least I think that's pretty wide open in terms of what we think the South Carolina receiving room looks like. There's really only Josh Fan and maybe some other players, but Landon Sampson's a guy who I think could step in and possibly sees a role year one. I think that he has the potential to come in and operate as wide receiver 2 for whatever that means. Because I think, like we talked about earlier, I think they'll run a lot of wide receiver 2 sets. So if it's Van, Sampson, and then Bell and Stogner, I do think that Sampson's a guy who could shoot up boards, and he's a composite 3-star, but a couple services have him ranked as a 4-star. So I do think he's going to keep rising at least a little bit. So it was good to get his commitment locked in because I thought that there was a chance he would transfer to Texas with the Ewers news. But he's a guy that I think of all the players in our class has the best chance of making an immediate impact.
Definitely. All right. That's a good name to keep in mind for. And, since we don't really know what this passing attack is, what I would assume you're just kind of looking for him just to make a little, at least, some splash in there. And then, his sophomore year, he could take on a bigger role. And I did watch a little bit of Tanner Bailey when I thought he was going to Oregon, and I thought I saw some nice things. And the only problem was at Oregon, that was before Bo Nitz went there. And, I thought Ty Thompson, since, he's only a freshman, I didn't know how much Bailey would play. So obviously it's South Carolina now with Rattler probably there for a year. He could take over after that. So I think that was definitely a good spot for him. And I know on the Devy debate, you guys especially you had a very impassioned speech about Travis Hunter. I loved listening to it. But other than just him, and not, necessarily to those schools, but do you think with the transfer portal and all the NIL, we're going to see more of these players go to like those, not like, blue bloods like Alabama and everything, go there, maybe get a little, make sure they secure some money. And since they know they can transfer, without waiting, it's kind of like there's no negative to doing that.
I think we will to an extent in situations where there can be compensation provided. So I think Jackson State was a really unique, like all the stars kind of aligned for Hunter here, where Deion Sanders had a relationship with Barstool, who is owned by Penn National Gaming, and Penn has a lot of money. And I think they were able to facilitate some sort of NIL deal there that made sense for him. So I'm not sure we'll see that sort of level again, but we're seeing high-end recruits commit to programs that you wouldn't necessarily expect. So, Kentucky got a top 13 offensive tackle. That was a big one. And not to spoil the show sheet, but Luther Burden, Missouri, I think that was a huge one too. But you're seeing some players like commit to places that you wouldn't expect. Arizona State just got like a top 40 wide receiver, or Arizona, sorry, not even Arizona State, which is
that was even more surprising because Arizona is a total dumpster fire.
Yeah.
So
you're seeing it happen. And I think part of that is like single recruits that maybe rank highly. a program or like the relationship the program has, because the program can't necessarily pay players like outright. But I think the relationships that a certain program has, if they can hone in on a single high-end recruit that they think can make an impact in their program long term, then I think that you're going to see singular guys go. So I think Travis Hunter is a good example of that. And then I think McMillan, who committed to Arizona, is another good example of that. And so, like, you might see one-off guys go to places that you wouldn't expect. I think that is the big impact that you're probably going to see long term. That these programs might hone in on like one guy that they really like and try to lure him away from other programs with some of this NIL money.
Right, but I mean, it's only to a certain extent, like you said, because we've seen in the past like week with Bama, they just keep on getting these guys like wide receivers. They had all those wide receiver commits last year, and they're getting even more. So it's I think Bama is really the only place that has been able to consistently bring in those guys and not necessarily had them transfer out, because they see at Bama, you just have to play 1 year there. Like James Williams, you have to play 1 year there, and they have that track record. And like I say, like especially wide receiver wise, you get that Bama bump, when you go to the NFL. They put you a little higher. So I think Bama's been able to do that, and I don't think a lot of other schools have necessarily been able to consistently do that. But I think you're right. Yeah, and that's a nice transition. Talking about players that we think went to the best situation to play right away. One of those players for me is Luther Burden, like you said, going to Missouri. Tyler Beatty is leaving, and he was one of their leading receivers out of the backfield, and they don't really have a lot. I mean, their offense was pretty much Beatty, and that's about it. So I think he could have an instant impact in that offense. The last couple of years, people said Missouri, their defense isn't good, so they're always in high scoring games or coming back, so they'll have to pass the ball a lot. So I really like him. Are there any players that you like getting some instant playing time?
I think that there's a good chance that Nicholas Singleton has like a Travion Henderson type rise, where it takes him like a game or two to really seize that backfield at Penn State. I think that he's probably going to step in as the best player there. Some of the Penn State guys that I know and I'm friends with, they think that Noah Cain was nursing an injury all year. I do think Nick Singleton is just going to walk in and just be better than him, to be honest. I don't think Kevon Lee's anything special. So he's a guy that I think is really going to just come in and basically cement himself right away. I think another player, and this is not that he's like a deep name or anything, but if Ty Chandler declares for NC State, I think George Pettaway is a guy who could seize a bigger role than people are expecting. And I'm not sure how great of a running back he is, but I do think he's somebody who can seize a role early, because it isn't really a competitive backfield, in my opinion. I think I didn't really like a lot of the guys that they recruited last class. About Kamaro Edmonds was a little overrated. Caleb Hood, I thought was like, he was fine. I think George Pettaway is better than both guys. And so he's a guy that I'm kind of paying a little bit more attention to than I would have otherwise, because I think that is a situation that lends itself to production, and it is an open enough situation where you can see a true freshman at least see some opportunity.
Yeah, that's a good point with the North Carolina backfield, and I'm assuming Ty Chandler is going to declare. I mean, I think he had a good enough year to go. And then you're right, they had the Hood and Edmonds last year. They had Pettaway and another running back that they're bringing in, or at least I haven't heard he's not going there. Marion Hampton, I watched a little bit of him, and he looks pretty good. So it'll be a nice, it's kind of, you would figure, especially if these freshmen coming in kind of take over, I would think, those other two might decide to transfer out or something. So, and they would probably have value if they transferred somewhere where they could play. So those are all good names. One player that, I've just kind of talked about, and when we did Devy draft for Campus 10, I took him as my last pick. I really like Branson Robinson with Georgia, and I'm assuming that Zamir White's going to leave. I guess he could come back, but I'm under the assumption that Cook and White are going to leave, so that's going to be Milton. And I'm thinking Branson Robinson could come in, and you see they like to spread the wealth, the running back room. So I think he could be the really physical, type runner and get some good time there. And another one that's a little deeper. Quarterback that's signed with FSU, AJ Duffy. He's not great, but I thought I saw enough good things, and where Florida State has really struggled to get that quarterback going, and they are getting some wide receivers in through the transfer portal. They got one from Oregon, and I think if they could get he could have some good value there because the Florida State isn't great, but their offense showed signs this year at times. So, that's another player, I kind of liked.
I like Duffy as well. And he's enrolling early. I'm not sure he gets on the field in the first 4 or 5 weeks, but I do think that if there's struggles there, then he can absolutely ascend to the role. And I think he's pretty good. I'm a fan of his.
Definitely. So now I just want to kind of talk, get your kind of process on what you do for the college fantasy projections and betting. We'll go with the projections first. What do you really look at? Are you looking at, the opponents, like all their stats and everything, or how do you really approach that?
Sure. So I have a database that I update weekly, and it has a whole bunch of team stats. It has advanced stats for each offensive player, and it takes into account kind of all of those things. And a lot of that is just me plugging in the teams and the matchups and making educated guesses more than anything. And so knowing all the data that comes in, and a lot of that is like EPA data. So expected points added per play based on where you are on this field, the game situation, etc. How many points you're going to add per play. So if a defense is performing really well, the number is lower. If the offense is performing really efficiently, the number is higher. Stuff like that. So that all takes into account how I evaluate. And then there's obviously an element of personal projection in there that based on what I've seen the last couple of weeks, based on what I'm reading. Are there injuries that are important on the defensive line? Are there injuries in the secondary where I think X team can exploit? Those are all things that go into my ranking. So I try to take as many data points as I can when creating those, and it's incredibly hard to project collegiate production because it's just so much randomness week to week. But I do think that with all the data points that we have in terms of offensive line, defensive line, EPA data, success rate data, etc., that we're looking at a lot of these advanced stats and really honing in on what I think is a pretty good projection. I haven't seen anybody else doing it better than we are at Campus Canton. There are very few people that are willing to undertake that process. And I think there are even fewer people that understand the complexities of what projections look like at a collegiate level. And so I think as a group at Campus Canton, and I bounce stuff off of the team all the time before even putting projections out. I just think as a group, we're doing a very good job of understanding what data points matter and the intricacies of rankings, week to week. Just how are we improving week to week, and adjusting our process as we went along. So I felt like our last couple rankings were some of our best, and I think just as a unit, I think we're really proud about that.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask you. So I know it's probably harder to make those projections early in the year rather than later because obviously you have less data points. And another thing is we've seen, some of those, the MAC or, Conference USA, they play the big Power 5 schools, those first few weeks. And then, they kind of get in their schedule later. So is there anything that you take into consideration with that? So the first few weeks, their stats are going to be skewed, but it's going to change, or do you just take that, week to week and it'll just kind of even out?
Sure. So a lot of it is conference based. So there's an adjustment that I have for an SEC school playing an SEC school versus an SEC school playing a MAC school. And then we get, like you said, when we get into the MAC schedule and MAC schools are playing MAC schools, then there's a totally different level of assumption that goes in. So I'm not even sure Lou Nichols was in my top like 30 for the majority of the year. But once we hit MAC play, Lou Nichols then became a top 10 back. And then at the end of the year, I think I had him in the top 5 or 3 multiple times because you saw what you needed to, what you expected from conference play. And there's a strength of conference element to some of the projections that I do. And so I try to take that into account when projecting these games. And so by the end of the year, when you're playing in conference schedules, the majority of the time, those are a lot more valuable. But in the beginning of the year, it is harder to project because a lot of what I'm doing is based on last year's numbers in terms of conference schedule and kind of like guesstimating where these teams are at. And so Bill Conley's SP plus numbers play a big part of that, and returning production metrics play a big part of that. So by week 3 or 4, I think we settle in a little bit more, but it takes a little bit to really nail down what we think players' roles are and then how good we think offensive and defensive units are.
Right. Another thing I wanted, something that I always struggled with. So, if you take, the even just defensive numbers, the how they do versus the run and how they do versus the pass, we have seen where it's kind of skewed where a team like is maybe top 10 against the run, but it's not that they're actually good against the run. It's that their pass defense is horrible, and that kind of throws it off. So do you have something in a data point or something to kind of, do something with that?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I see a lot of people use like raw rushing numbers. Like here's the number of yards allowed per game, or here's the yards per carry they allowed per game. What I look at is EPA. So that is basically, was it a positive play or was it a negative play? In like the simplest terms, in terms of success rate. So what was your EPA added? And then binary, like 1-0, was it a successful play? Yes, no. And that's a big portion of what I do. So you may allow 100 yards per game on the ground, which is really good. But if you're allowing like chunk rushing plays and your success rate or defensive success rate is really low, then that's a lot more important than like any raw rushing statistics. And which is why I try to rely on like those EPA success rate, like line yard numbers, which are far more predictive long-term than simply like looking at here's how many yards you allow per game. And so that's a big part of my calculation because I do think those numbers are inherently misleading because of exactly what you talked about. Especially with pass defenses, you see this more so. Like they create like a rush funnel a lot of the times where the rush defense is so terrible that you just don't want to pass. And so the passing numbers are great, even though the passing unit is like really, really bad.
No, definitely. Yeah. So now about how you guys do, your betting recommendations for, prize picks and everything. Is it kind of similar how data point wise to what you do with the projections?
Yeah, it is. Like I mentioned earlier, like I have a whole database that I plug in data to weekly and kind of make assumptions with, and I try to project the games the best that I can. And this is a new process for me. I'll be totally honest about it. And I finished 59% this year with like my process and the recommendations I was giving out. So like that to me, that's a win, especially year one. But a lot of the data is the same and it overlaps, and it really is the same assumptions across how I project fantasy performance and then how I project like against the spread and totals and stuff like that. And the biggest thing, and I think what differentiates me from a lot of other maybe collegiate bettors, especially, is I weight injuries, I think, heavier than a lot of other, more like a lot heavier than other people do. Like it really, really matters if you're missing a key player or like a key player as part of a unit. And so I think people, and Vegas is slow to react to this as well, which is why I think it's an advantage. Just paying attention to the injury news like week over week and then betting early, not like waiting until like Sunday at like 11. It's a huge advantage. And I think that that's one of the better things as part of my process that I've really honed in on. So I got all these numbers, but I also am like following people on Twitter. Just like I'm listening to forums and I'm listening to these podcasts for like specific schools who expect players to be out. Like I knew Treylon Burks was at an autograph signing in a boot and then he had a poor game. So like those sorts of things, if you pay attention to them, that those edges are out there. You just have to know where to look and like really listen to people who know more than you do. Cause like I don't know more than like 90% of people, but if I congregate that information well enough, that I think gives me an edge.
Yeah, that's good information because I was going to ask you that next because we've all seen, people, in C2C leagues have complained about, the injuries and it's how it's so hard. So that's good information that, you listen to all these different places, you read all these different places, because even if you just get that little tidbit, more than someone else, that puts you so far ahead of the game. And that's why, Campus to Canton, the website, has all that, and the Jarek with the metrics tool. It's one of the best things I've seen on, year over year and, coaching and players. So shameless plug for Campus to Canton. But if you're not a part of that or a subscriber, you definitely should. There's a great Discord and a lot of discussion and a lot of great content for during the college season. So that's great insight. That's something I've been wanting to talk to you about for a while. And because I know you were definitely on the tailgate talked about the injuries. And I know that's something that in the future I want to pay attention to more because you are always pounding that table about the Oklahoma secondary and and everything. And so we just got to listen to that. So I just want to end it with talking about the 2022 quarterbacks. As we're decoding Devy, talk about the Devy options. And I know you look at the analytics side. I just wanted to know, is there like a percentage or what you look at? Because I know some people are all film, some people are all analytics. What percentage would you say you are over analytics to just like watching them play?
Let's say like 60-40 analytics, maybe like 70-30 if depending on like the prospect. I think the numbers tell a better story for certain ones, and then film tells a better story for others. And I think a good example of that is Carson Strong. I don't think his analytics are particularly impressive, to be entirely honest, but I do think that he presents himself like on film as a much better player than his analytics indicate. And so that's a guy that I'm willing to like create exceptions for because I think there's a discrepancy between the two, and the numbers really cannot tell you everything. Like I truly believe that. And I am a way more analytics driven person. Like I think QBR is really important. Like EPA per play for quarterbacks is really important. Like those numbers are really, really important. And they are some of the best indicators of success long-term. But when we look at these numbers, there's a lot that goes into them. And there's a lot that goes into understanding what a quarterback is. And I think it's not the end all be all, to be like entirely frank. So I mean, it really varies player to player because I do heavily rely on the analytics, but I'm willing to say, okay, like they don't capture what I think they need to for XYZ player. And so it's just thinking critically more than it is anything. Like it doesn't have to be more complicated than like, look at the situation, look at what happened, look at the player's film. Like there's a discrepancy here and just acknowledge it. Like just married to one part of the process, I think, is just bad, like process in general.
No, I agree. And would you say that, at least from an analytics perspective, it's harder to just go based on analytics for quarterbacks compared to the other positions? That's
Absolutely.
What I always thought because, you don't always have that early breakout, with quarterbacks because, sometimes they have to wait a couple of years. Well, I mean, before the transfer portal, that was a lot of what coaches did. You came in, you definitely redshirted your first year, your second year, you might play a little bit, and then you took it over the third year where you don't really do that as much anymore. And kind of a weird, player before we talk about like how we would actually rank these is Kenny Pickett is a really weird player for me because there's some people that like are, love him and everything. And I'm not going to lie. I kept on doubting him through the year. So I thought, eventually he was going to come back to what he used to be, or closer to that. And he just kept on playing well. But the thing is, he had all those mediocre years. I think the biggest question is did he finally did something finally click and this is like him, going forward, or is this the outlier compared to all the other years? Analytically, how do you kind of is that where you kind of just the look at the scenario type thing, whereas because you had all these not great years and then this one big year, is that where you were kind of talking about taking both sides into effect?
Yeah. So to back up what you said at the beginning, right? Quarterback is an incredibly hard position in general for anyone to project, like from a film perspective, from an NFL perspective, from an analytical perspective. Like everyone struggles to project this position because there's so much mental, the mental aspect is so big, and it's really hard to understand that from a quarterback perspective. Like I do think players can be like broken by the system that they enter the NFL in. Like I worry about Trevor Lawrence, I worry about Zach Wilson, like the system that they're in. Like I do think they're good players, but I think that's a part of it, right? And so there's so much else out there that is hard to quantify. But in a case of a guy like Kenny Pickett, right, his numbers this year are really good. I cannot dispute that. Like he did really well at QBR, he did really well at just yards per pass attempt, all of that. What about his other 4 years in school? Like I'm right there with you. Like this was not a player who exhibited the traits the last 3 years. So like he came on pretty strong to begin his collegiate career. I think that he impressed early and then kind of like faded and then popped back up this year. But I just wonder if like that's way more system based. And so a guy like Kenny Pickett scares the crap out of me for the same reason that his analytics are really good this year. And for the majority of positions, you look to their best season. You want to say, okay, well, how did you perform in this season? And like, how far above expectation on a career were you? Kenny Pickett just scares the crap out of me. Like, if I'm an NFL GM, I would be terrified to select him. I'd much rather select like a safer option, I think, in Corral or Sam Howell. I just think they're like much safer.
No, I totally agree. What I've kind of thought is I kind of think similar with Pickett and like Strong, is I think they're capable of being NFL starters, but I wouldn't want them to have the pressure of being a top 10 pick. Like I think if they're like a back end 10 pick, teams that'll be in there that are like maybe just outside the playoffs or made the playoffs but need like a better quarterback, I'm fine with that because you have that around them. I just don't know if they can carry a team. Like I think Howell and Corral could possibly do that. Could they fail? Yes, that's with a possibility. But I think they are more, at least in my eyes, more capable of taking that pressure since they've had that pressure, whereas Strong and Pickett has not had that pressure, their whole career.
Yeah, and I agree with that. I think Pickett will be drafted top 15, just based on the buzz and like the way NFL media is treating it. I think I have always maintained that Strong is a first round quarterback just because the way NFL media talks about him and just like character makeup, and he's got the arm talent, all that, blah blah blah. Like you know what NFL media says, right? Like they just use all these buzzwords and whatever about Carson Strong, but I think he's going to be a first rounder. But I think he's going to be a late first rounder. So, like you said, like he might be put in a position to succeed. Like, what if he goes to the Steelers, where they have a lot of good options, and he's mobile enough inside the pocket, and he understands pocket presence to really excel? Because he's probably better than Ben Roethlisberger is right now. So like you're telling me that he can't take this team to the playoff. I think he can. And so he's like way more situation based. I think Pickett will go higher. And like what you said earlier, like that scares me with Pickett. Like a lot of things are going to be put on his shoulders. I think that is he really ready for it? It just scares me. Like he just doesn't have the production profile that I'm really looking for in a player. I don't know. Like I'd be scared if my favorite team drafted him, and I hate that the Panthers have Pitt connections because I'm afraid that they might. So I'm a little scared.
So before we do the ranks, one last thing I wanted to ask, because I've kind of thought about this. When people put out their rankings of, the players coming into the draft, Devy rankings or just regular, dynasty rankings or whatever, I've always thought this, when I do it, I am saying, what I think their career will turn into. But I know other people somewhat say like where they'll be picked. So What is your kind of opinion when you do the, when you rank them? Should that be where they're picked, or should that be what you kind of think their trajectory of their career would be?
So that's a really good question, because I think that there are two very legitimate sides to this debate. I am very far, I think, on the here's where I'm projecting them to be picked, plus like here's what I think of this player. So I was way lower on Rondo more than I think a lot of people were, because I did not expect him to be drafted in the first round or like early second. Like he went mid second, which is pretty much where I expected. But I value what the NFL says a lot. And a lot of people are like, well, the NFL's stupid. Like, they don't always know. But, like, yeah, the NFL's way smart. As a collective unit, is way smarter than all of us. Like, they have a lot more access to data. They have a lot more access to different data points. And I think there are some bad franchises, obviously, who don't look at that sort of thing. But as a collective unit, I think it matters. And I think for people to ignore the NFL side of it in totality is a mistake. And so when we see mock drafts get put out, or we see NFL insiders rank, like Dan Brugler releases his running back rankings, or Mel Kiper releases his quarterback rankings. Like those are things that I think we should be paying attention to and influence our rankings off of. So that plays a big role for me, because I want to be ranking within expectation, I guess, if that makes sense.
No, it does, because I think you do have to put part in of where they're drafted, obviously. So I think, listen to NFL, because, I'm not gonna lie, I've thought some of these rankings have been crazy before and everything. But when you think about it, even let's say, the NFL does get things wrong, obviously. But if that's their thinking, as like a group, I mean, you have to take it seriously, because it's how they're picked. Because let's just face it, if a quarterback gets picked either first or second round, they're going to have a longer rope than someone gets picked in the third or fourth round. They're going to have a better way. There's not that many of those Dak Prescotts and those Russell Wilsons that get drafted third or fourth round that are the franchise quarterback, because once they have those couple bad games, usually the team's like, I don't know if I want to depend on this guy, because he wasn't a first round pick. And I think for quarterback, that's a lot more important than, say receiver, because you could probably do third round and, for receiver or running back, because that's still day two. But I think that is important. It's not necessarily when the order that they get picked in, I guess, but just, kind of the round and everything like that. How many quarterbacks do you think will get drafted in the first round?
I think 4 and possibly 5. I keep going back and forth, because I think that there's going to be quarterbacks selected in the 20s. In terms of locks, I think we're going to see Matt Corral. I think we're going to see Kenny Pickett. I think we're going to see Sam Howell. I think we're going to see Carson Strong. And I think we're going to see Malik Willis. Those are my 5 that I think will make it. And I don't think Desmond Ridder is going to make it, simply because I'm not sure he's a better prospect than Malik Willis. Like I don't really even like Malik Willis as a prospect. I don't think Malik Willis has what it takes to be an NFL quarterback, to be totally frank. But 4 for sure, potentially 5. I think Howell's track record keeps him in the first. I think Corral's like he's an explosive playmaker, keeps him in the first. Kenny Pickett's senior season keeps him in the first. I think Malik Willis, just like his dynamicism, keeps him first. Then I have questions about Carson Strong, who I ultimately think will get drafted in the first. But I'm banking at least one of Willis or Strong goes in the first. So give me at minimum 4, possibly 5.
I think I'm on the same boat. So talked all this. So let's do our top 5 quarterbacks coming into the draft. As of now, obviously that might change, as more of the evaluation, because I haven't really done a ton of evaluation. We've watched them this season, so this will just be our first go at it.
Let's do it.
All right. So we'll go 5-1. So I'll give my 5, you give your 5, and back forth. So 5 for me is Carson Strong. So that mainly is because I actually like Carson Strong more than at least one of the ones above him. I'm just looking at what I think the NFL will do. Like we said, Carson Strong is a big, if he gets in the right situation, I really like that. But it's how those really go.
Yeah, no, I like Strong, so he's going to end up a little bit higher, but I'm going to give my 5 as Malik Willis. So I'm really worried about Malik Willis because I don't think he's a good quarterback. I think he's just a really great athlete who has a really dynamic arm. Ryan McChrystal, who works for Sharp Football, posted today, and he was talking about different quarterbacks and kind of like their statistics and how they fare, but he posted Malik Willis specifically, and he said overall on target rate in terms of FBS quarterbacks, Malik Willis ranks 92nd. On target rate, 10 plus yards downfield, Malik Willis ranks 106th. Sack or interception rate versus pressure, 133rd. There are only 130 FBS teams, so do the math. Adjusted net yards per attempt, 75th. That is not a good quarterback prospect. Regardless of how athletic you think he is, I think there are legitimate questions about whether or not he can play the position at the next level. And I hear the comparisons to Lamar Jackson. Lamar Jackson was so much better of a prospect. He was
he's nowhere near Lamar Jackson.
No, absolutely not. Lamar was a good prospect and had really solid advanced numbers. They are not comparable in any shape or form. So Malik Willis is my 5.
Okay, so Malik Willis is 4 for me. And this is kind of where we talked about, looking into what I think the NFL will do, and just here, I've just seen a lot of things where the NFL, the buzz, I don't know how real that is once they get into it. And I'll say this about Malik Willis. I don't think he's nearly as good of a runner as people give him credit for. I've seen people say that he's like Michael Vick and everything. And I don't think he's a great runner, but I don't think he's on that level. And those metrics that you gave are very damning, and he had a rough year. There's a bunch of those lower level teams that he struggled against. But I will say, if you watch him even against, like Syracuse and a couple, good teams, he makes 1 or 2 throws that is the reason he's getting all this hype. So the only thing for me is, will the NFL see those 1 or 2 throws and say, we can get him to where that's more the majority than just, every couple times a game? Or are they going to say, hey, he really struggles with this? I think he struggles with reading defenses. I think, like I've said before, I think if a team's going to pit Malik Willis, they have to kind of do what the Ravens did with Lamar. They have to be all in on creating an offense just for him. They can't make him into an offense that he's not, made for. But I feel like so many people are wanting to get that Nets, Lamar, or even the, Jalen Hurts had a little success. Those type of, mobile quarterbacks. I think someone might take him earlier than he should. Honestly, I don't think the way he throws the ball, he should be a first round pick. But just based on all those other things I said, that's why I have him at 4.
Yeah, I think he ultimately ends up in the first as well. But he's just scary. My 4 is Carson Strong, because I think Strong ultimately does get selected in the first. And I have seen Strong make throws this year that are just fantastical. I don't know how else to explain it. His arm and some of the throws that he's made. There's 2 throws against Kansas State, a Power 5 team, that are legitimately wow throws, where you watch and you're like, holy crap, I can't believe he made that throw. One to really tight coverage, then one deep along the sidelines. And I do really think is a first round quarterback. And I think he's a much better passer than Malik Willis is. And so that's what really pushes me ahead, because I think he has the potential to probably have a longer career if we're looking at what sustains yourself long term. He can operate in that Big Ben Tom Brady mold, and I don't think I think Malik Willis is just way more projection. So that's what flips them for me.
No, I definitely see that, and I think the biggest thing for me too is sometimes I'm looking at it at an NFL perspective rather than just a fantasy perspective. Because does Willis have that upside? Like if he is a starter because he can run, yeah, he has that huge upside. Because we've seen Jalen Hurts have horrible games, but he runs for like 90 yards, so he salvages the fantasy game. Same with Taysom Hill. Another thing I think Carson Strong will do, kind of the Mac Jones thing. I think he's really smart. I think on interviews, he's going to blow people away. So I think he could be this class's type of, Matt Jones, where people are like, oh, he's not I think Matt Jones can move around a little bit better. And I know Strong still has problems with his knees sometimes. I don't remember what game it was, but he got it hit early in the game. And we thought, I think we were talking in the chat that he should just take himself out of the game, and then he somehow started getting things going later in the game. And I think that's another thing. I think he's a tough guy that will do that. And kind of like you're saying, I think Pittsburgh would be a really, really good spot, which would probably make Austin upset, because I know Austin doesn't really like Carson Strong that much. But yeah, they want that tough guy, and they need just someone that can how he can launch the ball so accurate down the field. That's another part that I really do like about him, that I think he could be he's like one of those guys that could be a really good starter, maybe never put up gaudy numbers, but be really good on there. So so 3 for me is Kenny Pickett. I think the other 2 are just above him, and all the things we've said, the worries about Kenny Pickett. But I mean, his last year, I mean, you can't deny how good he was against some, good defenses. So that's where I have Kenny Pickett. I'm guessing in the, 10 to 20 pick range, somewhere around there.
Yeah, I'm on the same page. He's my 3. He's just a tier below the other 2, and I think just he has a safer first round projection than Strong, or else I would put Strong above him. I think Strong's a better player, but I think there's a better chance that we see Pickett selecting the first and Strong. So I'm just basically hedging bets at that point.
Definitely. But like we both said, it would scare me to death. I mean, I could see him flame out just as easily as being really good, just because he only had that one really good year. So 2 for me is Matt Corral. I really like Corral, but I'm still on the Sam Howell train. I think he didn't have as big of a year. Howell didn't have as big of a year at UNC this year, but I don't think that was all his fault. Their line was horrible. He lost a lot of weapons, and I still love how tough he is. How he does not get the credit for the running ability that he has. I know, you've talked about that too. But I think both would be good NFL quarterbacks. I do worry more about Corral system-wise, just because I don't know what he's going to be like outside of Kiffin's system, because he made it a lot easier with all that RPO and all that up-tempo. And depending on what team he goes to, I don't know if they'll do that.
Yeah, I tend to agree. I think that my issue with Corral is, to be fair, the issue that I have with Corral is the exact same concern that I have with Howell. But Howell is far more proven as a quarterback. I mean, Howell set records as a true freshman. He almost beat Trevor Lawrence and Clemson as a true freshman. Howell plays in a gimmicky offense. Corral plays in a gimmicky offense. Which quarterback do you think has a better proven track record? So he's my 2 as well. There are a lot of similarities between these 2 quarterbacks. And so it's to me, and at least in my opinion, it's who is the safer pick of the 2? And that's why I rank Corral at 2. I just have more questions about him.
No, I do. I agree. And I know a lot of people, are more sold on Corral, which I get, but we did see too, when he got banged up, he wasn't the same, dynamic player. And we saw when Howell was banged up, he could still take the beating a little bit more. obviously I would hope Howell understands in the NFL he can't be taking on linebackers like he try to do at North Carolina, which I loved like what he tried to do, but he just, you just can't do that in the NFL. But I know a lot of people aren't as high on Howell because of this year, but I think he still showed enough. He still pulled out some great games like that Wake Forest game where honestly early on I thought North Carolina was going to get blown out, but Wake Forest defense is horrible and Sam Howell like put him on his back, mostly running the ball.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that Matt Corral 30 carry game against Tennessee gave you the exact same concerns that you see with Sam Howell, where neither guy knows how to go down with contact. They continually try to take out linebackers, which when you're playing against a Wake Forest linebacker, it's a little bit different than meeting like Devin Bush in the secondary. Like you're having a little bit different conversation there. And so I don't think either guy is like exceptionally mobile. I do think Sam Howell is a little bit more mobile than Corral is, to be honest, because he came in as a dual threat quarterback and was a really impressive runner in high school. But both these guys need to learn a heck of a lot in terms of sliding, one, and not getting injured all the freaking time because you decided that you're going to take on some linebacker in the secondary. It's just stupid the way that they're currently operating. They need to both make improvements in terms of their rushing game, but I think they can. And they're to me, very similar players. I default to Howell because we've seen him perform with elite talent. Corral maybe hasn't had that opportunity, but I know Howell has it in him, and therefore I ended up defaulting to Howell as my quarterback one.
No, I agree. I think both could be really good. And it's going to be interesting because, if Houston is going to pick a quarterback because they're going to be up in the draft, and if Detroit does, so, it looks like the Giants will be up there. And the Giants are actually one of the teams that I thought would be a good spot for Corral if they get a good new coaching staff because they have some weapons there. So, yeah, I tend to agree. So that does it for the show. Chris, thanks for coming on. I had a lot of fun talking, about college, your analytic, what you look at, and even talking a little Gamecock football with you. So,
listen,
thanks for coming on.
Gamecock football is I don't know. It's like, I feel like a masochist sometimes just rooting for the team because it's just painful. Every single Sunday or Saturday, I get my hopes up. I'm like, oh, maybe we're going to be Georgia. Maybe we're going to fall off the upside. I don't know. And it was like 40-13. And so I enjoy talking about the positives about the program. So I am glad that we were able to have that conversation. I'm happy to be on. I feel like I beat a lot of the Campus Canton folks. So
you have. You're
so I think that's all I'm here for.
Yeah, you definitely did. So thanks again, and that'll do us for our show this week.